Father, we thank you once more for your love and your mercies to us. We thank you that we all arrived safely, and we pray now that as we open our hearts to you, we'll see the importance of the things you give us to study. Help us to realize there are no pretends in your kingdom. It's all life and death. Help us to be on the right side in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Well, today we're going to talk about an infection. We have been attacked by a virus. Virus O. And we've had it for a long time, and it's getting worse. The first time we noticed it was after a Seventh-day Baptist minister talked to Dr. J.H. Kellogg. He's the first one we noticed that had it. It seems that it bewitches the person. It gets a hold of the brain. And once he had it, there was nothing he could do about it. Ellen White tried to save him from it, but it was not possible. And he ended up leaving the Seventh-day Adventist truth. The virus got in. As we have studied here, we have identified it by the fact that he went over to the Trinitarian side of all this. And we have been taught to call it pantheism, but that's the chicken way out. It was much more than pantheism. It was about the personality of God, not just a God, not an abstraction about God, but the actual, only true God. Kellogg, because of the infection he received, changed who God is in his mind. And it destroyed him. He didn't have God anymore. He had an idea about God. And so for him, God was gone. But the reason God was gone is because the spirit of prophecy was gone first. So please notice the sequence of how the virus works. Before you see the deceptions, the spirit of prophecy is already gone. And then the virus started spreading. W. Prescott, Herbert Lacey, A.G. Daniels, Leroy Froome, F.C. Wilcox, President McElhaney, and then it moved from there to our educational system. It made its way over to the seminary. And from the seminary, the 1980 General Conference, where the church accepted what the virus does officially. And none of these people knew they had the virus. And to the present day, nobody has really stopped to identify it so you can do something about it. There have been a lot of books written about the effects of the virus. But people have not stopped to see what it really is. Well, we can see the effects. In that 1980 General Conference, by that time, the King James Bible is gone. The spirit of prophecy is gone. The pioneers are gone. This all happened to Kellogg first, and then it spread. Until today, almost the entire church is infected with this virus. So when you get rid of the King James Bible and you get rid of the spirit of prophecy and you get rid of the pioneers, what's left? That's the question. What is left? Well, Ellen White, of course, saw it in her day, and she trembles for our people. We know that. And she said it almost killed her. And when God showed it to her and what it would do to the church, she didn't know what to call it. So the angel came and told her what it is. And we still aren't getting it. The angel said, free loveism. Free love? What's that? It's love without a standard. It's love without the law of God. So now we can look at it a little bit. God told us now what the virus is. And it is such a simple thing because we all use the word and we think we know what we're talking about. But he gave us a word for it that we can understand what it is if we will study to see what it's against. The word is spiritualism. Isn't that easy? Spiritualism, not pantheism. Spiritualism. No law. So now there's no King James Bible, there's no spirit of prophecy, no pioneers, and no law. And of course you can't say that to any member of the church because they all think they love the law of God. They can say it every day and everything's fine. But how many of them really, if you ask them, do you keep the law? They will look like you, that you're some kind of a crazy nut. Nobody keeps the law. We just believe Jesus did, and he did it all, so that's all we need. We don't keep the law. Do you see? There's no law. It's gone. Where did all this come from? Who gave us the virus? We know who. It was Satan himself. And he began doing it in heaven before there was ever earth or man. He had his virus already. He got a third of the angels with it. He said, I hate the law. Let's get rid of it. And can you imagine angels went for this virus themselves? He convinced them. We don't need the law. We're holy. We don't need it. God is holding us down to that law. Let's be free. And they said, yeah, let's be free. Free loveism, see? There it is. Let's be free. So let's look at the law for a minute. I hope you will indulge me as we go through this introduction because I'm moving towards a very difficult subject. We have to see a bigger picture than we've been noticing. When we're talking about the law, what law are we talking about? The Ten Commandments. Does anybody have a problem with that? The Bible and the spirit of prophecy, when they say the law, that's the only law they're talking about, is the Ten Commandments, the Decalogue. This is very important because there are a lot of people who have the virus who are all confused about this. The Ten Commandments. Now, when I say the Ten Commandments, what is the center of the Ten Commandments? Do you see where we're going? Satan hates the Ten Commandments, but there's one he hates more than all the rest of them, see? He hates the fourth commandment because it's the only one that identifies the only true God. And he doesn't want anybody to know who the only true God is. You can have a God as many as you want, but not the real one. He doesn't want that. And the theory was that people who keep the fourth commandment have the only true God. Did you notice I said the theory? Because it hasn't worked out that way. The people who go to church on Saturday think they have the only true God. So let's keep moving with this. The greatest commandment in the Decalogue is the fourth commandment. Early writings, page 65. It's the greatest commandment. That commandment tells us who God is. He's the creator. And it says who he is. He is merciful. That's what the fourth commandment is all about, is mercy. So the Sabbath is the issue. We have to understand that's what we're talking about today. The Sabbath is the issue on planet Earth today. So then, let's talk about the virus now. Most people who think about this subject and try to follow it carefully, historically, biblically, spirit of prophecy, and through the pioneer, have a misunderstanding. Most of them think this particular virus is a doctrine. And today people are making that same mistake. People are saying the Trinity doctrine is the virus. It has taken a hold of the church, and there we all go. No, the virus is not a doctrine. So what is it? Well, think about Kellogg, Froome, the rest of them. What is it the virus does? It gets a hold of your attitude. It changes your attitude. And the result of that changed attitude is you have to depart from God after you have known Him. Kellogg was a tremendous person. He not only was intelligent, he might have been one of the brightest men the church ever had. He was highly talented. He was intelligent. And he was zealous for the message. And he did something no other man could do, or no other man did. He established the health work on correct biblical principles. And the whole church misunderstood him, but he went forward doing what God wanted his people to do and be health missionaries. But then he got the virus. And he ended up departing from God and losing the whole thing. And all the other names I gave you also did the same thing, because they no longer trusted the spirit of prophecy. Every one of them. And of course, after 1930, they all gave up the King James Bible also. And today, that's archaic to people. They say, what now? He did okay until he got to the King James. What's that got to do with anything? That old Bible, we don't need it. We have so many new ones. Even the people who are trying to reform the church have left the King James. And it's an interesting thing, because every now and then I get an email from somebody saying, you know, I use the King James, but over here in this place, I have to let it go because there's a better version there. And you know what it usually is? It's something they're trying to prove, and they can't do with the King James. So they whip out a New Testament from a new version, and there it is. They have something to work with now. And they don't realize the corruptions that are there, and they're trusting the wrong place. But that's not our subject today. What we're trying to show is here is there's an attitude. And that attitude has come from the top place that the fire is reached before 1980. The attitude says, salvation by scholarship alone. Now you think about that for a minute. Salvation by scholarship alone? Yes. You trust your brain for your salvation. That's what has happened to the people of God. And now we have a CD so that everybody can get there like anybody else. And now we have people on the web who are, by scholarship alone, teaching the other people who may not know how to use the CD that well yet, so they listen to the new ones on the web. They're the scholars. They're the students. They're the ones who know. Well, I think we need to be very careful. That's another meeting we may have someday. What happens when a person trusts the web? That's not our meeting today. But what happens when a person has moved over into this scholarship alone idea? There's a symptom, at least one symptom. There's probably several. But one of the first symptoms that you can see is that the people who have this virus think they can judge the Bible. They will tell you which verses are inspired and which ones are not. Yes. And when they get there, they will tell you the Bible is not infallible. Especially if you tell them the Bible is the King James. And they will say, oh, that's really ridiculous. We know there's nothing infallible about that Bible. It's inferior to all the modern versions. So you can see what's happening here. They're judging the Bible, the Word of God, and they have not read or understood what Ellen White has to say about judging the Bible, the Word of God. And of course, as soon as they judge the Bible, she says the very next thing they're going to do is judge the spirit of prophecy. And that's just a clapper. Immediately, that's what they start doing. They can judge the Bible, they can judge the spirit of prophecy. And so what is the result? It's a word that Ellen White uses, and she says we have the problem in our midst everywhere. The word is insubordination. We no longer do what God says. We do what our brain says. We don't submit to God. We can't do that because we're our own God. This is straight out of Genesis 3, all I'm talking about so far. Now, what happens when a person starts trusting their own brain to do research and saying, the only thing I'll believe is what I have researched and is logical to me, and everything comes together? What are they going to believe? False doctrine. That's the only place they can go. So I have done this today. Now, you know all the things that we've talked about so far. I didn't need to tell you. You know. But the problem is that when people get into this process, they end up saying, this is an organization problem. I don't have it. It's the organization that's wrong, not me. It's an organization problem. Well, the organization has the problem, but it's not the only one. That's why we're looking at this today. Because the people who think it's the organization problem have their own problems. For example, there's a group up there who believe you have to keep the 14th of Abib to be true to the Bible. Do you know what the 14th of Abib is? The Passover. That was the Passover of the Jews. And Jesus became our Passover on the 14th of Abib. And these people, Quartodecimans is the technical name for them. Yeah, this has been a long time in the process. The 14thers in Latin. These people say you have to do the Passover on the 14th of Abib, or you're not in the Bible. Well, now, I would never argue with anybody about the 14th of Abib being when Jesus became our Passover. I would never argue that. But when people start telling me I need to keep the 14th of Abib to be a Christian, now wait a minute. In Story of Jesus on page 95, Ellen White says this. This was the last time that Christ was to keep the feast with his disciples. It was really the last Passover that was ever to be kept. For the Lamb was slain to teach the people about Christ's death. And when Christ, the Lamb of God, should be slain for the sins of the world, there would be no need of slaying a lamb to represent his death. Now, there's a lot more to her thought here, but we just want to know one thing. When Jesus died on that cross, there's no more Passovers to keep. So why should I keep track of the 14th of Abib? So those 14thers don't realize they have the infection. They need to stop looking at the organization. They have the infection. Have you heard anybody talking about the flat earth? There's a whole bunch of people out there, and their mission in life is to get Adventists to understand the earth really isn't round, it's flat. And they think they have discovered something new. Did you remember last week I said it's always new light? Always. But let me read you something that Ellen White said. It's in a strange manuscript, but we have them available now, these manuscripts. Manuscript 145, 1904. She said this, I have a message to this people in regard to the life they must live in this world to prepare them for future life which measures with the life of God. What people? What people is she referring to here? Well, you don't know because I haven't told you yet. But there was a man who represented a group of people who was after Ellen White that says, you have to tell the people the earth is flat. Ellen White! And she says, I have a message for you people. I have a message. We have not to do with the question whether this world is round or flat. So this has been around for a while. People think they've got something new. Ellen White already addressed it. So we have nothing to do with that. So if you ever meet up with one face to face, you just tell them, well, Ellen White already decided that. And you will know they have the infection really bad when they say, well, she had no light on that. That's another of their favorite words. When they believe something that Ellen White never talked about because God never told her to say it, they always say, she had no light. And then there's the new moon Sabbath people. Have you heard about that? Yeah, they have taken the word moed in Genesis 1:14, and they say that God made the sun and the moon to keep track of the Sabbath. Well, I've looked at the word moed a few times myself. And I think the King James boys knew exactly what they were saying when they said, for seasons. For seasons. And of course, the word does mean appointed times. Well, seasons are appointed times. Okay. I'm not going to do a study right now on the word moed. I just want you to know that's where they go. The new moon people. And they say the new moon begins the time when you start counting for the Sabbath every month. Because nobody knows which day is really the seventh day. That's their argument. But you know when there's a new moon. And so when there's a new moon, you start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There it is. There's a Sabbath. And of course, it always comes out that the 15th and the 22nd are Sabbaths. See? Always. So they say you always know when the Sabbath is. It's the 15th day and the 20th. Of course, there's 2 other days in between, but you know when the Sabbath is by the new moon. No confusion. And so these people, they're almost unshakable. It doesn't matter how much Bible you give them. They know now because they can keep track of the new moons. But they forgot to read Exodus 20, didn't they? The Sabbath is the 7th day. From when? From Adam. Did Adam know when was the 7th day? Yeah, he kept track. He kept track all the way up. Only 2 generations between him and Noah. There were 7 generations in between, but there were only 2 between Adam and Noah. Methuselah got it almost firsthand from his father. It comes right straight through. So from Noah into the new world, we have the 7th day, keep track of. No problem knowing when Adam's 7th day was. And you can do that all the way through history. There's no problem except for the new mooners. Okay? Now, that's not all. There are other people. The ones we're going to try to understand are the people who are promoting the feast days. They don't call them feast days when they're talking to you because they have to be more intelligent than that. They call them the appointed times. Now we're back to the word moed, which takes us back to the new moons. See there? And we are not attacking any of that. We just want to understand what people are saying so far. And if you talk to any of the feast people, you will find out they have something waiting for you when you start quoting Spirit prophecy. I wish you had no light on that. There it is again. It's always there. She had no light. And the first time one ever told me, and this was many years ago, I just looked at them and said, do you know who you're saying had no light on it? And they said, what are you saying? No, it's what you're saying. What light did Ellen White have? Where did she get it? It's from Jesus himself. Now, what you are telling me is that Jesus didn't tell her something that was light. You're telling me he held something back from her. I've heard that someplace else. That's exactly what was said in the Garden of Eden. God is holding back information from you. You be careful what you're listening to from people. They're drawing you into places to infect you because they don't know they're infected yet. So Satan hates the law. He hates the Sabbath. And that's where this is all aimed. Every bit of it. I'll try to make it clear to you in a moment here. In 7 MR 188, be not deceived. Many will depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. We have now before us the alpha of this danger. That was the beginning virus. The omega, there's virus O. The omega will be of a most startling nature. Startling nature. Oh, we're going to see what's startling in just a moment. But first, did you notice what she said? What would they depart from? Many will depart from the faith. The faith. You remember those 2 words because she warned us what Kellogg did. And what everybody else who's infected with the virus will also do. They will depart from the faith. What is the Seventh-day Adventist message? It has two little pieces to it. The commandments of God. No, you said that too fast. And the faith of Jesus. Do you see? To depart from the faith means you depart from the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. The one that he transmitted to Ellen White, and he gave her all the light we need for salvation. He didn't leave out light that we need. The commandments of God, the faith of Jesus. In Jude 3, it says God's real people on this earth will zealously contend for the faith. There it is. The faith of Jesus, which has the Ten Commandments on it. Yeah? The faith, which was once for all delivered to the saints, the Holy One. And spiritualism, remember when we went to Plato and all of that? Spiritualism hates holiness. You can't be holy. It's impossible. You cannot keep the Ten Commandments. You can't do it. Well, who teaches that? Satan. He's the only one. God doesn't teach that. Jesus came here to prove we could keep them. Keep the whole thing together. Now, I said for all, and somebody's going to jump up and down and say it doesn't say that in the King James. Well, it says once. It says once. And in the original language, the thought is very clear. Now, everybody has to know the original language, so you're just going to have to leave it at once. Delivered. Once delivered. That's King James language. For all. Once and for all. It's been done. It can never be changed. Okay? So then, startling. Let's look at this word startling. Would it be startling to stand up in front of all of the Seventh-day Adventist Church at the same time? 20 million people who think they're Seventh-day Adventists. Would it be startling to tell them the third angel's message has morphed into spiritualism? Do you think anybody would just say, oh yeah? Okay, what else is new? Come on! The Seventh-day Adventist message turned into spiritualism? Well, that's what we've been talking about. That's the infection. That is virus O. And you just ask the people if they believe the King James Bible is the Bible, the Word of God. Just ask them. Ask them, what Bible do you carry around? What Bible do you read? And then after they give you that, you ask them, do you really believe in the spirit of prophecy? Is it an authority to you, or is it just pastoral? Because that's what we teach in the church today. It's not an authority, it's just pastoral. Spiritualism. That's a religion that denies the authority of God. That's a religion that has departed from God. And that religion does not have the authority of one true God. That's a religion that believes in Nicaea, in Constantine, in Origen. You go through the list yourself. It's a man-made church under the agency of you-know-who. And when you get rid of the only true God, you have also gotten rid of his law. They go together because the law is a transcript of his character. And when you get rid of God and you get rid of his law, you are no longer a Sabbath keeper. You just go to church on Saturday. Because the only Sabbath keepers on this earth are the ones who worship the only true God and His law the way He said it, and keep it. You remember Ellen White said, if a person keeps the fourth commandment, they will keep all the rest. And when a person tells you, I can't keep the commandments, well, they're not Sabbath keepers. Isn't that clear? The infection runs deep. And people don't know they have it when they have it. Well, Sunday keepers will tell you, well, of course we don't keep the Sabbath. And Adventists jump up and down and say, woo, you're going to go to hell. You don't keep the Sabbath. Well, now, wait a minute. These Sunday keepers are being honest. They're saying we did away with it. Because we did away with the only true God. We're Trinitarians. Trinitarians don't believe in the Sabbath, the Bible way. So how did they get there? They will tell you, Sunday keepers will tell you how they gave up the Sabbath and why they don't feel bad about it. Yeah. And they whip out their new Bibles, the new versions, and they start reading to you. And almost invariably, they will go not to the New Testament. Because what can you find in the New Testament that says we got rid of the Sabbath? No, they go theological salvation by scholarship. See? Let's go where the theologians go, the Sunday-keeping theologians. And where did they go? Leviticus 23. If you haven't dealt with Sunday-keeping ministers, you don't know some of it. I have dealt with lots of Sunday-keeping ministers. And they go to Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. Well, that's kind of interesting. Why do you suppose they go to Leviticus, the 23rd chapter? Because that's one of the virus chapters. I'll try to explain that. In Leviticus 23, you remember that Ellen White said that God has left hooks in the Bible to hang your doubts? God has left Leviticus 23 worded the way Moses worded it so that people can have a hook if they want one. We're going to see what the hook is here. I will tell you before we read it what the problem is, and then we'll see if it's really there. The way it reads, a superficial reader of Leviticus 23 will see that it says something about the seventh-day Sabbath in verse 2. And then they keep reading, and then they keep reading. It says, the feasts of the Lord. These are the feasts. And so in the average brain, the average mind that only knows how to read superficially, they say the seventh-day Sabbath is a feast, like all the rest of them. And the theologians of the Sunday-keeping churches then put that together, and they say, well, the Sabbath, the seventh-day Sabbath is a feast. So if the feasts were done away with at the cross, guess what else was done away with? That's how they destroy the Sabbath. They make the Sabbath like the other feasts. That's how Sunday keepers destroy the law of God. And you say, well, is that a big deal that the Sunday keepers do that? Well, yeah, it is, because they're not the only ones who've done that. I want to read you a sentence from a book that was just published weeks ago for the Seventh-day Adventist people. It wasn't done by the church. It's one of the people who got smart studying the web. Let's see what the sentence is. It's on page 18 of their book. I'm not going to give you the title. I don't have any reason to put people over into that kind of literature. I just want you to know what's out there. But page 18 of that particular book, he is giving several points of why he has written this book. And the seventh one is the one we're dealing with today. The seventh point reads like this. Is the seventh-day Sabbath a statute or a feast of the Lord? That's the question in this book. Here is the answer. The very first feast mentioned in Leviticus 23 and Numbers 28 is the feast of the weekly Sabbath. This is a person who considers himself a Seventh-day Adventist Sabbath keeper, trying to give light to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And this person says the seventh-day Sabbath is a feast. And the place that he went to prove it is Leviticus 23. Exactly the place where all Sunday keepers go. Now, I don't know about you, but that to me has something very strange in there. Leviticus 23. So then, I'm going to read you now the proof of Leviticus 23. I'm going to read it to you because it's the very next sentence after his statement. The very first feast is the seventh-day Sabbath, is the weekly Sabbath. Here's his proof. Verse 1 of Leviticus 23. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, Concerning the feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest and holy convocation. You shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. These are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which you shall proclaim in these seasons. And so he says, see, it says the Sabbath, the seventh-day Sabbath, is a feast. These are the feasts. And of course, people who cannot remember what they read in the rest of the Bible saying the Sabbath is not a feast, read this one little verse in Leviticus 23, and they're trapped because their brain can't take them any further than their eyes are showing them right there. Let's see what Moses is saying here. It says, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them concerning the feasts of the Lord. Who's Israel? It's all the children of Judah, right? Okay. Now, as the Lord begins the discussion here, concerning the feasts of the Lord, this is what this chapter is going to be about, is the feasts of the Lord. That's the first trap. Immediately the mind says, well, everything in this chapter has got to be a feast. No, that's not what it's saying. God is going to discuss the feasts in this chapter. These are my feasts. But then before he begins, because there's going to be something in the chapter called Sabbaths, plural. He wants these people to know where Sabbaths, the idea of Sabbaths comes from. So he begins with a parenthesis before he begins talking about the feast. He says, 6 days. Remember now, 6 days. So we'll be done. Thus, the seventh day. Did he say a seventh day? It's like the faith, the law, the seventh day. See? If you study the Sabbaths of the feasts, they don't fall on the seventh day. They fall all through the week, according to the year. People don't think about that when they read this. So let's keep going here. 6 days shall be work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest and holy conversation. You shall do no work. It is Sabbath of the Lord, the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. These. Okay, now, He has now told them about the seventh day. Now he's going to begin his discussion of the feasts. These are the feasts. And now he's going to start listing them. Now, we're not doing that today. We will discuss, particularly throughout the Jewish year, what the feasts are. Because the Jews understood. Moses understood what the feasts are. And none of the people ever thought the seventh-day Sabbath was one of the feasts. It's a bad thing to quote the Old Testament and then forget about the Jews and not see what they really did for the rest of the Bible. All right. Now, I'm just telling you this because this is the latest manifestation of the virus among us. And this little book is starting to spread out. And people are using this information to convince other Seventh-day Adventists who don't know the Old Testament and don't have a good understanding of the Sabbath as a commandment of God, which is the moral law. And they're trapping them left and right. Now, ordinarily, I would ignore all of this because we have important things to be doing about the real gospel. But this is becoming such a problem among us that something needs to be said to help our people study this through for themselves to see whether they really want to go for this, because it's been here since Kellogg. So then, what's being said is the seventh day is like all the other Sabbaths. So who else says that? The Sunday keepers. That's how they got rid of the Sabbath. They made it like the other feast days. They got rid of the Ten Commandments, because if the Sabbath is a feast day, then the rest of the commandments are too, so everything has to go. That's how the Sunday keepers got rid of the law of God. Are you recognizing any of this? Who hates the law of God? Who hates the Sabbath? Of course, the people who are moving these directions say, I love the law of God, but I don't keep it. I love the Sabbath, but I'm not a Sabbath keeper, because you have to love the law of God to be a Sabbath keeper. It's just a big confusion. So then, as I have talked to some of these people, and I've been talking to some just recently, I have been very surprised at some of the things that some of these people are telling me. They not only believe this thing, that the Sabbath is like the other feasts, they believe a lot of other things that are nowhere in the Bible and that actually contradict the Bible. And I don't have time to be telling everybody that I talk to about this, about all the strange things they're believing. So we're doing a meeting or two here on this subject so that if they want to know, they can listen, they can study, they can find out. But let's ask the question about the pioneers, because in this little book that I read, there's not one quote from the pioneers. Not one. Before I go into the pioneers, it occurred to me, we need to look at maybe a few statements of Ellen White first, because Ellen White is the first thing that goes, then it's the pioneers that goes next. So let's look at her first. We will look at statements by Bates, by Bordeaux, by Jan Andrews, by James White, the pioneers, who all argued with the Sunday keepers about the seventh-day Sabbath being a feast. They knew better, all of them. But we'll wait. Let's see what Ellen White has to say about this. Review and Herald, May 6, 1875. God gave a clear and definite knowledge of his will to Israel by special precepts, showing the duty of man to God and to his fellow men. The worship due to God was clearly defined. A special system of rites and ceremonies was established, which would secure the remembrance of God among his people and thereby serve as a hedge to guard and protect the Ten Commandments from violation. Today we're not going to discuss it. We're going to spend a whole meeting on what do statutes, what does that mean? What are judgments? because people with the virus don't know what they mean. They think those words mean peace. But the word statute has to do with law. Ask any lawyer, ask any judge, ask anybody that knows anything about law, and they will tell you statute means law. It does not mean peace. Okay? That's the very first thing. We will spend a whole meeting proving this from the scriptures. So then, God made special statutes to protect the Ten Commandments. In other words, to show the people how that commandment with just those few words breaks down into your life so you can look at it in a practical way. This is the law for every day. God's people, whom he calls his peculiar treasure, were privileged with a twofold system of law. Now you tell me, what are the two? Moral and ceremonial. Was that hard? Everybody who's ever been baptized as a Seventh-day Adventist should have known that before they were ever baptized. But I'm learning that many people were baptized with absolutely no instruction. They were just asked if they believe in Jesus and the Sabbath. And would they tithe to the church? I've talked to lots of people who know nothing about the two covenants. And apparently they don't know very much about moral law and ceremonial law and what the difference is. So people can come by and say there's only one law. Did you know that the pioneers fought a thing they called the one law theory? Because if there's only one law, then if you destroy all of it, or any of it, it's all gone. Well, let me tell you today the other side of what's being said by these same people. If the Sabbath, seventh-day commandment is eternal, and it's a feast like the other one, then they all are eternal. Did you get that? That's their logic. It's Sunday-keeping logic. We are just beginning this study because this virus goes very deep. It took out Kellogg. It took out A.T. Jones. It took out Wagner. It took out, giants. It took them all out. I think we need to be very careful. That one law, she says, pointing back to creation, which is that one? What law is that? The moral law. The one law, she said, goes back to creation, to keep in remembrance the living God who made the world, whose claims are binding upon all men. Did you get that? The moral law is for all humans in all time, for all eternity. Now notice what she says. The other law, which law is that? Ceremonial. Given because of man's transgression. Well, this law has to do with sin. Transgression of the moral law. So this ceremonial law is not the moral law. They're different. This law was made because of the violation of the moral law, which is eternal. So she says, the obedience to which consisted in sacrifices and offerings pointing to the future redemption. Each is clear and distinct from the other. How in the world did this person get to the idea that the seventh-day Sabbath is a feast? And how does he find people to listen to him when he says it? That's the mystery to me. It's the virus. They don't even know what the virus is, but they have it. From their creation, the moral law was an essential part of God's divine plan and was as unchangeable as himself. The ceremonial law was to answer a particular purpose of Christ's plan for the salvation of the race. So the ceremonial law is because of sin, and it has to do with how a person is saved. Now the ceremonial law obviously can't save anybody because the moral law can't. So what's it for? It's to tell us the plan of salvation, the things Jesus would be doing in the plan of salvation. We'll get to that as we try to clarify more. It says the typical system of sacrifices and offerings was established that through these services the sinner might discern the great offering, Christ. So the ceremonial system is not something to be kept for salvation, not even a sign of salvation. They play that trick too. But the ceremonial law was established to show what Jesus would be doing in the plan of salvation up until the time he died. And at his death, we don't need the symbols anymore because now he's doing it and we know he's doing it. The law of types reach forward to Christ. All hope and faith centered in Christ until type reached its antitype in his death. The statutes and judgments specifying the duty of man to his fellow men were full of important instruction, defining and simplifying the principles of moral law, and for the purpose of increasing religious knowledge and of preserving God's chosen people distinct and separate from idolatrous nations. Now, I haven't tested any of the people yet on this point. I've been too interested to hear what they were really saying. Because I found it very difficult to believe that any Seventh-day Adventist could believe this stuff. But they do. So I have never asked certain questions. I have several I'll get around to. But I want to ask them what an antitype is. Do you know what I think they're going to tell me? The antitype is when the event takes place. In other words, when Jesus became the Passover, that he is the antitype to the Passover. And they can understand that one because that one's easy. But then, what's the antitype for the Day of Atonement? Oh, that's October 22, 1844. Really? What's the antitype for the Feast of Tabernacles? Oh, that's the real tabernacle. That's not what she just said. She just said what the antitype is. I'll read it again. Until type reached its antitype in the death of Christ. Jesus is the antitype of all the feasts. And none of the feast people know that. That's very important. Because if Jesus is the antitype for all the feasts because they're all fulfilled in him, then there's no reason for them anymore after he died. I will talk more about that because that seems to be a complicated concept for many people. But it has to do with the two covenants. And because people don't understand the two covenants, they don't understand the concept of antitype. But Ellen White just said it in one sentence. Let's keep reading. We have a few minutes here. The statutes concerning marriage. Is marriage a feast? You can have a feast while you're getting married, but the feast is not marriage. They're two different things. People think statutes are feasts. No, she just said statutes of marriage. The laws of marriage. Statute is law. Inheritance and strict justice in dealing with one another were peculiar and contrary to the customs and manners of other nations. Okay, that's all I want to read on that. She says those laws, for example, of getting married, were very important, and because the Jews kept forgetting everything, God had to write it down in the Ten Commandments. You need to be married. And so the statutes help people get married, laws of marriage, to protect the law against adultery. Now, that's all I'm going to say about that. This is very important, what we're talking about here. It's so important. I don't think any of our people are being educated along this line because I've never heard a minister talking about these things. That's the reason so many people are being trapped into this, because they have nothing to work with. They don't study for themselves. They just wait for somebody to come and feed them with a bunch of scriptures and spirit prophecy that seems to make sense. But let's continue here. In consequence, I'm down to paragraph 10 now in this Review and Herald. And if anybody is listening, please read this entire article carefully. Don't listen to any man on what this says. Read it for yourself and see if it fits what people are telling you. In consequence of continual transgression, the moral law was repeated. Now we all know in Galatians, Paul uses a word that the King James translators translated added. Well, that's not the real meaning of the Greek word there. The real meaning is spoken or repeated. And she uses the right idea here. Ellen White never misses. She said it was repeated because of transgression. In awful grandeur from Sinai, Christ gave to Moses religious precepts which were to govern the everyday life. Laws that tell you how to live, to keep the Ten Commandments. That has nothing to do with feasts. Laws are not feasts. Okay. She called them statutes. They were explicitly given to guard the Ten Commandments. They were not shadowy types. So, this is one of the arguments of the feast people, and they don't realize what they're saying. They say, Ellen White says the feasts were not shadows. She didn't say that. She didn't say that at all. She said the statutes were not shadows because they were laws the same as the Ten Commandments. And the people get themselves all mixed up listening to people saying, no, the statutes are feasts. Well, I'm sorry, folks, they're not. If you believe that, you will never find truth. Because the truth is, the statutes, Genesis 26:1, Psalm 19, Ezekiel, I can name you scripture after scripture where the statutes are defined as the commandments of God. But we're not there yet. We're just trying to understand the problem so we can really come at this. We need to see it, how horrible this virus is that has taken so many people throughout the entire history of our church. They were not shadowy types. The statutes are not shadowy types. They're eternal because it's the Ten Commandments made simple. They were to be binding upon man in every age as long as time should last. And so the people say, see, the feasts are for all men always. No! No! It's the Ten Commandments that's forever, the statutes that protect them. These commands, the statutes, were enforced by the power of the moral law. See that? This is Ellen White telling us the truth, and this is a far cry from what people are saying today. Jesus, had taken upon himself the sins of the world. In the likeness of sinful flesh, he condemned sin in the flesh. He recognized the claims of the Jewish law. Which one is that? The ceremonial law. And by the way, the people don't like the word ceremonial. Because the people who put out these kinds of little books tell them the word ceremonial is not in the Bible. The word ceremonies is, and it's only there one time. See, so the people say, oh, well, how wonderful, salvation by scholarship. Ellen White uses the word ceremonial almost every time. So you have to give up Ellen White to keep your theory, okay? Jesus recognized the claims of the Jewish law, not the Ten Commandments. The Jewish law, the ceremonial law, and by the way, Jesus gave them that law. He recognized the claims of the law that he gave to them until his death. Until his death. That, to me, seems like it ought to end the whole talk. I mean, what more is there to talk about? It's what the Bible says. It's what Ellen White says. It's what the pioneers all taught. How in the world can we call ourselves Seventh-day Adventists and contradict all of that? I'm going to read that sentence again, because she says it over and over and over again. He, Jesus, recognized the claims of the Jewish law until his death. That's it. It's over. It's gone. Oh, my mind is moving into place. I've got another meeting in my head for another. I can't do it. We've got to wait. There's so many things I want to point out that the Bible and true prophecy say. You know, for a person who didn't have any light on this subject, she sure wrote a lot on it. And all of it is against what people are saying today that she had no light about. The death of Christ gives the Christian a correct knowledge of the system of the ceremony. And it explains the prophecies which still remain obscure to the Jews. Christ, the angel whom God had appointed to go before his chosen people, gave to Moses the statutes and the requirements necessary to a living religion to govern the people of God, not to give feasts, to govern the people how they live every day, all day long. Statutes. Things that tell you how to do the Ten Commandments. The law of Jehovah, dating back to creation, was comprised in the two great principles. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. All right, I have to finish. Our time's about up here. All right, I think I will close with this from her article. This is paragraph 14. God graciously spoke his law and wrote it with his own finger. Who wrote the ceremonial law? Moses. Do you suppose there's a difference in the laws? God wrote one with his own finger, and he told Moses to write the other one. Sounds to me like there's a difference, a big difference. It says he wrote his own finger on stone, making a solemn covenant with his people at Sinai, and we'll have to talk about the covenants to get all this straightened up. God acknowledged them as his peculiar treasure above all people upon the earth. Christ, who went before Moses in the wilderness, made the principles of morality and religion more clear by particular precepts specifying the duty of man to God and to his fellow men. So now we know what the statutes are. They are the law of God put into a form where humans can understand what to do every day to be sure they're really doing the Ten Commandments. Those statutes told men what their duty was towards God and towards man. The feast don't do that. This was for the purpose of protecting life and for guarding the sacred law of God, and that it should not be entirely forgotten in the midst of an apostate world. That's all we can do today in this particular article. Now, I want you to notice we only looked at one article of Ellen White. She wrote 25 million words. I want to say one more thing. Christ Object Lessons, page 377. I want you to know something, because I want to point out to you how we read and miss what's being said. We have all read this page, but now let's see what it says. Okay, this is in the chapter Who is my neighbor? We all know the story. Okay, the Good Samaritan and all that. We want to talk about the lawyer here. People seem to miss the part between the lawyer and Jesus. The lawyer has asked him some questions here, and the Pharisees put him up on it. They said, it'd be a good idea for you to ask him your question. Let's see what he does with it. What was the lawyer's question? What should I do? Yeah. What should I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus wasn't going to play the game with him. He said, what have you read? This is a lawyer. He knows the law. He knows the statutes. So Jesus said, you already know the answer. Why don't you tell me? What is it? What did you read? Thou shalt love the Lord thy God as your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus, what did Jesus say to him? That's the right answer. That is the right answer. Do that. You have eternal life. And the man was in trouble because he knew he was not a commandment keeper. Big trouble when you ask God, what do I need to inherit life? And he says, keep the commandments. And you say, that's the end of the conversation. Except this lawyer was asking in front of all the Pharisees and all the people, everybody standing around, and they're looking at this lawyer. And he just said out of his own lips that he knew he was supposed to be a commandment keeper. What's he going to do now? Because all the people know he isn't. He was so embarrassed, he could only do what everybody does when they know they've been caught. Ask another question. Divert the whole thing. Who's my neighbor? But we're not getting into that side of the story. I just want to remind you what the story is about because I want to read one little sentence that Ellen White wrote that no Sunday keeper knows. And probably very few of us. The lawyer, Christ Object Lesson 377. The lawyer was not satisfied with the position and works of the Pharisees. He, the lawyer, had been studying the scriptures with a desire to learn their real meaning. He had a vital interest in the matter. What does the word vital mean? Life or death. Yes, life or death. Man, he has to know. And he's not getting it from the Pharisees. The church is not telling him the truth. It says he had a vital interest in the matter, and he asked in sincerity, what shall I do? In his answer, as to the requirements of the law, he passed by all the mass of ceremonial and ritualistic precepts. This lawyer, this Jew, living in the Jewish system, before the cross, when he asked the question, how do I get life? And Jesus asked him, you tell me. He said, love God and your neighbors by his... And he left all the ceremonies behind. He denied the ceremonial system as a means of salvation or something you have to do after you're saved. The lawyer in Christ's time. Did you ever spot that? There it is. That was a smart man. You go home and read it in your Christ Object Lessons. It's fantastic that that's hiding there in that little sentence. He passed all the ceremonial system by as worthless, meaningless, and she says that over and over and over again. Well, if it was worthless to this man before the cross, what do you suppose it ought to be to people after the cross? That's all I have to say today. We are now into our subject. We're going to go after this now to see what the virus has done to us as a people. Father, we're so thankful for your word. We're so thankful for the spirit prophecy. But more than anything, we're thankful for the Spirit of Jesus, your Son, Help us to see that just knowing there is one God and he has a son doesn't mean very much. It's nothing more than a ritual, a ceremony, until we make the connection and we hear the voice and we have the Spirit in our own lives. We thank you for your forbearance, for your long-suffering. And we pray for your people. There are many honest souls who have no idea about any of this. There are people floundering around listening to anything and everything, becoming quartodecimans, becoming flat earthers, becoming everything that's out there. Help us, Lord, to be Christians. In Jesus' holy name, amen.